Then we can think, all our individual problems, suffering, as well as our collective problems and suffering of the world. They all are result of undisciplined, unsubdued mind. They all are result of our sentient beings' greediness, anger, hatred, ignorance, egoistic mind, and so forth. As long as those delusions are there, there will continue to be conflict, problems, suffering. So the only way to solve all the problem, all the conflict, all the suffering is by eliminating the very root of all these conflicts, suffering, and problems, the delusions. And in order to eliminate the delusion, all the delusion permanently, we need to generate the antidote, the wisdom realizing the ultimate nature. In order to generate that penetrating wisdom of special insight, one need to develop karma abiding or shamatha. And to develop karma abiding or shamatha, we need to meditate, practice. And to be able to have a success in our practice, meditations, we need to continue to study and learn more about them. For that very reason, that's why we come together to study the Lama Tsongkhapa middle Lam-Rim that explain very detailed, in a detail, how to practice karma abiding or shamatha. Due to the virtues of all we have created, and especially through coming together here, listening to the Dharma. Due to all of that, may we be able to achieve fully enlightenment as soon as possible. For the benefit of all sentient beings. Okay. I prostrate to the Arya James, thus did I hear one time the Bhagavan was dwelling on the mass of Vultures mountain in Rasgir, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagavan was observing the concentration on the categories of phenomena for profound perception Also at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then through the power of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Avalokiteshvara: how should any son of the lineage train who wish to practice the activities of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra. Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wish to practice the activities of profound perfection of wisdom should look upon like this correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness form. Emptiness is not other than form, form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, the phenomena of emptiness without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, no division, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, and no consciousness. No eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind. No visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. There is no I element, and so on up to and including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on up to and including no aging and death and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and the path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, Bodhisattva rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the 3 times also manifestly completely awakened or unsurprised or perfect, complete enlightenment and reliance on perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurprised mantra, the mantra equal to the unequal. The mantra that truly pacifies suffering. The mantra that truly pacifies all suffering should be known as the truth, since it is not false. The mantra of perfection of wisdom is declared Bodhi. So, Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Master, should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan arose from the concentrations and commented the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, this is son of the lineage, it is like that, it is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom just as we have indicated. Even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagavan having thus spoken, the Venerable Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Master of Avalokiteshvara, and those surrounding in their entirety, along with those world of God, the Bhagavan. Sa shibe ge chung shen me to ra re ra le she ye de gen ba de sang ge shin do mi de o wa do gun nama da shin I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient. Sangye Chodan Soge Sonam La Chanchu Batu Dane Dagi Shesheki Besonam Ge Dola Penche Sangye Duba Sangye Chodan Soge Sonam Chanchu Batu Dagi Shesheki Besonam Dola Penche Sangye Duba. So in order to develop a strong meditative concentration, shamatha, or karma abiding, one need to overcome the main obstacles. The main obstacle being the excitement and laxity. And in order to overcome those two main obstacles, we need to apply the antidotes, that is the mindfulness and the vigilant or introspection mind. So when we try to develop shamatha, the main practice that we apply is the mindfulness and introspections or vigilant. And from the scripture point of view, we went through where Lama Tsongkhapa explained what that mindfulness mind is, and what that introspection or vigilant mind is, and then now we are aware that Lama Tsongkhapa is explaining then the two main obstacles. What is that excitement? One of the obstacles, and one of the other obstacles, laxity. So we can identify the more, as we study, learn more about what those minds are, what their nature are, what is their functionings, and how they affect our meditations. Then once you know better, then when those mind arises, you'll be able to identify it. And when you are able to identify, then you will be able to overcome them. If you know you are able to recognize your enemy, then you will be more cautious and take every cautious to protect yourself. But if you don't identify the enemy, even the enemy is there, you wouldn't take any actions to protect yourself, because we are not aware that is the enemy. And so therefore, identifying is important. And in order to identify, then we need to certainly learn more about that. And so I think I think we're on page number 201. And I think where it's presenting the source, where it says first excitement, I think that one, I think maybe we finish that part. Yeah, I think that is what we.
Yeah, I think we're at A, towards the bottom.
Okay.
Sum up the people
okay.
together.
Okay. Okay. So sometimes, as it says in Lama Tsongkhapa, and some translation, laxity is, some have translated as sinking. The mind, which is kind of, in Tibetan is a shumba, and that could have many kind of meaning, like kind of your mind being kind of down, so sinking, or your mind being down, not uplifted, when your mind is not so uplifted but kind of down, that is what we call shumba. So here and then here Lama Tsongkhapa says, some people kind of mistake lethargy, and that is another state of mind. In Tibetan is mukpa. That also lethargy is that similar like laxity. It like the clarity or limpidity, and then abide. And then to be able to abide in the object without scattering to the other objects, to be laxity. So the they cannot differentiate. Some of the practitioners have not been able to differentiate two different minds, lethargy and laxity. They have very similarity in terms of they both lack clarity. They both are kind of more like a singing. And so some of they are unable to differentiate those two minds. And so, and Lama Tsongkhapa was saying that's unreasonable because in many texts, it is explained lethargy as being a cause of laxity. And so since it's explained as a cause, because of lethargy, then laxity arises. So lethargy mind being as a cause for laxity, so therefore it can't be same mind. They are different mind. One is cause. The lethargy mind is the cause, and laxity is kind of more kind of result of that. And that is been explained both in the Kamalashita stages of meditation too, as well as Sutra unraveling intended meaning, you know. And then in the scriptures, commitment knowledge, it is explained, laxity is explained as one of the, you know, secondary minds, so secondary afflictive distractions. So it is explained as a distractive mind, but also which is afflictive, delusional mind. But Lama Tsongkhapa is saying, however, you know, the laxity doesn't always has to be a delusional or afflictive, you know. There can be a laxity, you know, as a virtues, you know, and so therefore it doesn't have to be delusional or afflictive. And so I think, so again, so then it come the difference between the lethargy and laxity. And so then in the next page and the B, it explains, you know, commitment of knowledge, and then treasure of knowledge, auto commentaries. It is explained the mind, the lethargy, to be like your mind becoming very heavy, you know, not light, but very heavy. Sometimes we feel that, you know, and because your mind is heavy, not so light, and therefore your mind becomes very unserviceable. Just like our body, you know, when our body is too heavy, then your body is less flexible and less relaxed and light and less serviceable. Same way mind, sometimes we know our mind becomes very heaviness, and then because of that, you know, there's unserviceable, you know, you want to do something but you can't do it. You want to think something, you are unable to think it. It's kind of foggy, you know, heavy and kind of foggy. And that kind of the lethargy is part within the mind, is part of ignorance, okay? So it is part of ignorance. So on the other hand, the laxity mind is you know, when you hold the object of meditation, you know, it is unable to hold the object very tightly, very clearly. There is a slack in that, you know, and so there either there is unclarity, and sometimes when even there is clarity, it is unable to hold tightly, and so therefore it doesn't have the intensity, the alertness, you know, while there's clarity, but there is no intensity or alertness, and so that is laxity. So yeah, therefore even there is a factor of limpidities, you know, when we talk about laxity, you know, in a gross laxity, there is not even clarity. In the subtle level of laxity, there is clarity factors, but then what is missing is that the alertness or the intensity or the and holding the object tightly or intensity. And so that is explained in the meditation, the stage of meditation too. So I don't think, yeah. So when there is no clarity, like a blind person's internal darkness, they're explaining as a laxity. But as I mentioned, sometimes the subtle laxity, there's clarity but no intensity. So then Lama Tsongkhapa say, in the other great texts, I have not seen a clear take on definition of laxity. So Lama Tsongkhapa has explored on these subjects in many Indian sources. And then he said, in all Indian sources, all these great scriptures by great Indian masters, he doesn't see much explanation on this. But he sees some of them, like in Kamala Shila stage of meditation too. So he quote from that, but he said otherwise he doesn't see so many of them, so much on that in many other scriptures. So as I already mentioned, it's not same because laxity has virtues. In regard to the laxity, there could be either virtues, or neutrality, which means neither virtues, neither non-virtues. Okay, so of course, normally the mind can be divided into three categories: virtuous mind, non-virtuous mind, or delusional mind, and then more neutral state of mind, which is neither virtuous, non-virtuous, or non-delusionals. And so in terms of laxity, whereas lethargy, that mind, is only non-virtuous, or a natural obscurations, and is part of ignorance. So there's no virtues. There's no virtuous lethargy. So therefore, these two minds are not same. Whereas some practitioner kind of confuse they being the same. And so here Lama Tsongkhapa again kind of clarifying the differences between these two minds. They both are obstacles to the karma abiding shamatha, but the lethargy as being more like the cause that leads to the laxity, the result. And then okay. So again, I think we have been kind of mentioning here again, Lama Tsongkhapa clearly explaining in order to overcome the obstacle of laxity, including a subtle laxity, there need to be not only the clarity of the object, clarity towards the object, but also there need to be intensity or tightness, and those two factors are needed. If you don't have those two factors, then you will not be able to overcome the subtle laxity, and so therefore, again, in the great text, referring the great text here, Lama Tsongkhapa mentioned time to time, great text. What it means is those great Indian masters' commentaries, the Nalanda's commentaries, those are the one. And he, as you can see, he always tried to go back to the sources, and because it's much more I'm having okay. So in that, in order to eliminate the laxity, because you say, laxity, as in some translation, it says sinking. So you see that your mind is kind of sinking or down. Okay, when you have laxity, your mind is kind of not so fresh and so uplifting, but kind of sinking or kind of feeling down. So what you need is your mind to be more refreshed, more uplifting, And so therefore it is explained, you should uplift the mind. And how to do that, how to uplift the mind. And then, for example, by meditating on a joy, something that gives you a delightful and joyful mind, and by meditating on such as Buddha's image or light, So when you kind of meditate the Buddha's image, and especially if you have a strong faith in the Buddhas, when you think of Buddha's image, there is a joy in that, especially if you can have a clear visualization of the Buddha's image, it gives you kind of joy, and that joyfulness lift your minds, or we can visualize the brightness of that image or light, and that kind of make our mind more refreshed, and less dark, and so therefore when we do that help us to overcome the laxity in some way, and that's one way of kind of uplifting your mind, So at the end, because here it says, and then you need the both clear object and tightens your motor apprehensions. So in order to overcome the laxity in your meditations, not only your mind need to hold the objects, apprehend or hold the objects with a clarity, but also with the tightness or alertness or intensity. That is important. If you don't have that, then there is a danger that we can fall to the subtle laxity, which a lot of meditators fall into that dangers. So again, I think is, okay. So then next one, it says, excitement is easy to recognize. When your mind is kind of excited, and when your mind is running after some, attractive objects, pleasant object, is more easy to recognize that that interference, that obstacles. But laxity is much more difficult to identify. And so therefore, here is even in the great texts, even in some of the Indian scriptures, many of those commentaries, they don't clearly identify the laxity. They don't go in. Lama Tsongkhapa, he doesn't find so much detail on that particular, and therefore that is also why it's difficult to understand. And that is why also a lot of meditators get confused. That subtle laxity to a karma abiding or shamatha, because your mind can focus on the objects without any excitement, any excitement. And not only that, you also are able to have the clarity of the object and the subject, both. There's clarity in the mind. And so with that clarity and stable mind, stability, and if you can meditate for hours and days, Of course, a lot of meditators think they have achieved shamatha, karma abiding, when they are able to do that. Not only that, there is certain level of blissfulness also there, you know. But then even in that case, still one might not have still achieved the karma abiding or shamatha. Still there might be in this more subtle laxity. And so therefore, so what is missing in that? What is the missing part? The missing part is the intensity in that mind. Here it translates as tight, but more than tight, more I will think maybe is intensity. You know, your mind need to have that alertness or intensity, not only clarity, stable, but intensity or strong alertness in that. And so that is where that mix, you know. And so therefore, again, you know, these clear explanations you don't see in many other scriptures. Only Lama Tsongkhapa really give this very subtle. Of course, later many of the meditators and Lam-Rim, they also follow, but in the earliest texts, you know, and that is always been one of another Lama Tsongkhapa's incredible uniqueness, you know. He goes more detail and clarify subject that has not been so clarified, you know, where it's kind of vague. He does a lot. And so here, so it is very important part. It's very important because here, as Lama Tsongkhapa said, that is essential. That is essential because this is the major ground for mistaking one's concentration to be faultless. Even though someone might be in this subtle laxity, but they can mistake this to be a faultless concentration. And the reason they can get mistake is because the stability is there, the clarity is there, even certain level of blissfulness is there, and one can meditate for hours and days. I think I would easily be mistaken for achieving a shamatha or faultless concentration when you have that. But Lama Tsongkhapa is saying, still you have not achieved, because what is lacking is that intensity. So that is where, you know, therefore you should investigate and identify it well with the mental subtlety based on your experience. And in according to statement of stage of meditation. So in terms of the scriptural authentic in an Indian master, then it's the stage of meditations is one of the source for that explanations. Then in terms of yourself, with our own experience, then that is how we have to find out, you know. Whether there is even though we are able to concentrate with stability and clarity, but whether there is an intensity or not, then we have to identify, we have to understand through our own experience. And Chöndrö Rinpoche, you know, there is a general kind of among the many monks and practitioners, you know, there is an understanding Chöndrö Rinpoche is someone who has achieved shamatha, karma abiding, you know. He meditated for 20 years, it is said, you know, when he was hiding when the Chinese came in one room, and then he meditated for, and so a lot of meditators, those monks who are seriously trying to develop shamatha, karma abiding, they have tried to go and see him, taking his advice, also there is one monk from Serame, our class, and he left some time ago before he finished his PhD degree. He went into the mountains, I think in Bhutan, to do meditations, and he focusing on shamatha, and it seems he has achieved shamatha later, and he was known to have achieved shamatha, and so another monk was also meditating there, and again, that monk, he thought he had achieved shamatha because he was able to meditate just as is mentioned here. And so he was not sure, whether he had achieved shamatha, but in his experience, it feels like he had achieved the shamatha because he can concentrate with the stability, clarity for long times. And so he went to see that monk who has known to achieve that. And then they were sharing their experiences and back and forth. And then he said, still you need a little bit of intensity. There is mixing of a little bit of intensity, And because he is able to point and say because of his own experience. For us who doesn't have experience, how much intensity and whether you are missing this intensity or that much intensity, it will be very difficult. That's why Lama Tsongkhapa was saying, with your own experience, it has to. And so, and someone who is really have achieved and that have experience, it is important to. And Venerable Rene, who has been also trying, focusing on shamatha for a long time in Vajrapani for many years. And I think when Chöndro Rinpoche was visiting in that area, their area, I think he went and see. That was a long time ago. I don't remember the year. And I think what I heard is at that time, Chöndro Rinpoche said that he had reached around 6 or 7 stages. From the 9 stages, like he was in like 6 or 7 stages. So also that Chöndro Rinpoche also explains, just as here Lama Tsongkhapa explains, that intensity or the alertness, or that is important factors, very important factors, because without that, then there is a danger of being mistaken. That's the subtle laxity, formless meditations, or shamatha or karma abiding. So that is. So I think here it doesn't explain about the gross and subtle level of excitement and laxity here itself. But maybe I thought maybe I will kind of go a little bit on that according to some, like in a Liberation in Palm. Liberation in Palm, Pabonga Rinpoche explained gross and subtle excitement and gross and subtle laxity. And also Chöndro Rinpoche also explained similarly like that. And in that, the way it is explained is the gross excitement is explained when one loses the object of the meditations. Okay, So you lose the object of your meditations and your mind has scattered somewhere else and distracted to something. That is the growth, excitement. I think that is more easy to identify. Then the subtle excitement is more difficult to identify because it's more subtle. And so that is, even though one does not lose the object, so you at that time, you doesn't lose the object or your meditation, whatever that object is. But from one side of the mind is ready to look at attractive appearance. So one side of the mind, your mind is just starting to get distracted towards something. So you are not totally distracted. You are still focused on the object. You haven't lost the object. But one corner and one side of the mind, your mind is starting to kind of get distracted, and run after, because that kind of excitement is a part of attachment. So then it kind of runs after the, pleasant or attractive objects. And in a Pabonga Rinpoche, it gives an example, like a water running under the ice. So you don't really see water running, but it's running after, So that is why it is more difficult to identify. When we really lose the object, then we know that we have lost. But so in that way, your mind is not totally there with the object. Your mind is with the object, but not totally there. Because one side of your mind is starting to get kind of distracted. So then in terms of laxity, it is explained, the gross level of laxity, even though one is able to keep the object with your mindfulness, there is no clarity in the nature of the mind itself. So, there's no clarity in your mind towards the objects. So even though you are able to keep the object, even though your mind is holding the object or your meditations without losing it, but then there's no clarity of that object within the mind itself. So that's growth. That is also a little bit more easy to identify. Then subtle, there is both stability and clarity, but no alertness, in focus, attention or awareness, So there is no alertness or intensity in that. So that is, so then His Holiness Dalai Lama kind of even go a little bit more deeper. He explained gross, subtle, and more subtle level, 3, within each of them. That in one of his commentaries, he explained from gross, subtle, and more subtle level. And in that, the gross excitement or distractions is losing the objects is same, thereby losing, so you lose the objects and your mind gets scattered and wander off. That is same. And then subtle one, he explained, similarly, while one side of mind is aware of the object and not losing the object, but one side of mind is distracted towards desired object. So your mind is two-minded, not totally into the objects. Your mind is two-minded, You have not lost the objects. You are still focused on the objects, but your mind is not fully into that. Even though maybe more side of your mind is to focus on the object, but some corner, some side of mind, your mind is starting to get distracted. So your mind is not fully one, but might kind of two-minded in a way, you know. Then subtle, the most subtle excitement, distraction, even though not distracted or two-minded, but very close to be distracted. So your mind is not two-sided like the subtle mind, the second one. Your mind is not distracted at that time, but here your mind is close to be distracted. So it is ready to get distracted. Not distracted even from one side, but now is ready to get distracted. So that is, you know, that is, then in terms of the laxity, the growth, you know, is similar. There's no clarity and alertness or intensity of the mind that grows. Then subtle laxity, even though there is some clarity, but there is no intensity, you know. Subtle level, there is a clarity with the object, but there is no intensity. And the most subtle level, even though there is some intensity, but losing little, you know, you started to lose the intensity a little bit, you know. So it's like, you know, you are not very tired, but almost getting tired. Do you get it? Maybe it takes few moments to get tired, feel the tiredness, you know. So it's starting to go towards that. And that is, so you can see with that, so then, you know, so yeah, so that is something that I wanted to kind of explain a little bit, because in a Lam-Rim, itself, it doesn't kind of really explain the subtle and gross and subtle level, and because this is the most important part of, is to really identify those obstacles, gross to subtle level, because if we don't really identify them clearly, then even when we are in under the influence of one of those obstacles, we might not be aware, and we not only not being aware, we might even be confused and mistaken to be a true, correct, formless concentrations, and that will be a, if that happens, then that will be a kind of dangerous. And then you will be spending months and years in that subtle laxity. And as I mentioned before, he's only sharing. Some meditators have shared me experience after they have meditated, where they found their mind being kind of dull, you know. Their mind kind of being a little bit kind of forgetful and dull. And the reason, I think, is because there's no intensity, you know. There's no intensity in your mind, in your meditation. There's no intensity, and you have spent so many hours each day, weeks, months, year. And even though your mind is focused, even though there is some clarity, but you don't have the intensity. And without that intensity, then slowly your mind become more kind of that kind of forgetful, instead of being more kind of alert, you know. And so that is where, when we miss that factor, it can be kind of unhelpful, or not only unhelpful, even destructive in that way, you know. So yeah. So then Lama Tsongkhapa the second, why we need to generate, once we have identified the excitement and laxity, which are the main obstacles, it's not enough just identifying them through scripture, through scripture understanding, studying, but then we should be able to identify when we meditate in our mind with our own experience, and to be able to identify and recognize them, then we need a strong practice of vigilance, because the vigilant or introspection mind is the one that helps us to identify and recognize when one of those inner obstacle or inner enemy arises. If we don't have that strong practice of introspection and vigilance, even when they arise, we will not be able to be aware of them. And so therefore, here Lama Tsongkhapa says, is not enough merely to have understanding of laxity and excitement. So, just by kind of scriptural understanding, you need the ability to generate vigilance, and that vigilance is the one which kind of watch while you are in meditations, whether one of those enemy of the vigilant, excitement or laxity, whether they arises or not. And it is that vigilance that is watching them. And when you watch them, when they arises, immediately you are able to identify it, recognize it. The moment you identify it, recognize it, then you can take actions to kick them out from the house of your meditations, from sneaking inside. A lot of time they sneak inside in the room of your meditations, in your mind, but we are not even aware of that. So then we don't try to kick them out, And so that is what the vigilance does. So that is why we need to generate evidence. So here is saying not only we need a strong practice of vigilance to be able to identify and recognize when either the excitement or laxity arises, but even more stronger introspection where you can identify, recognize even before they arises. The thief or the enemy have not sneaked in your room, but you can see they are coming there from somewhere there, and you are so then you shut down the door even before they come inside. So then you don't have to kick them out and fight with them once they are inside. It's easy. Then you just lock the key from inside. So the more earlier you are able to recognize it, the more earlier you are able to identify it, the more easier it is to deal with them. The longer it takes us to identify them, the more hardship it is, the more harder it becomes to apply the antidote and to overcome them. And so whether it's a mindfulness, whether it's a vigilant, you start with a very, not so powerful mindfulness meditation or vigilant meditation, and slowly we build up that practice, become more and more stronger and stronger. At the very beginning, the enemy of thief, enemy or of excitement laxity arises and totally overtake it, we are even not aware. And slowly, we will be able to be aware. And slowly, we will be able to be aware even more quickly. A lot of time, it takes maybe 10 minutes before we are aware we have lost our objects and our mind is wandering up, you know. Your mind has already wandered up and then you are having this all fantasy and dream and many things, you know, your mind all over the world. And it has already been 10 minutes or 15 minutes, you are not even aware. And suddenly, oh, I'm distracted. And slowly, you might be able to identify from 10 in 10 minutes, slowly in 5 minutes. Slowly as through our practice, as our mindfulness and introspection become more stronger, better, then you will be able to identify within the 2 minutes, slowly within 1 minute, slowly within 1 second, and gradually, even before they arises. Even before they arises, when certain cause and condition are coming together, as His Holiness was explaining in the most subtle level, when you are starting to lose the intensity, you haven't lost it, but you are starting to lose it, and you are aware. And so then you can put a little bit more effort not to lose that intensity. And so then you don't have to go. Or even you are not distracted, but starting to get distracted. And if you recognize that, then you don't have to get distracted, get too minded. And so therefore, the strong, vigilant mind is need to develop where you can recognize even before any of them arises. Not only in you know, when you are trying to develop a shamatha, even in our any practice, it is important, you know, in all other practices, to have that kind of strong mindfulness and vigilant to become any of our meditation or practice to become successful, you know. And then about that, Lama Tsongkhapa saying in the stage of meditation 2 and 3, if you notice laxity in the mind or suspect it might arise, so that is what it is saying. Suspect means it has not arisen. It is kind of getting ready to arise. So to be able to recognize, even where you suspect it might arise. And if you know the excitement, so same way, the mind or suspect it might arise. So suspect it might arise means that it has not arisen at that moment, but there's danger of arising it. And to be able to be mindful and with your vigilance, being aware that it might arise, and so therefore you can take actions, whatever antidotes. You can apply whatever antidote to stop it from arising at all, you know. And so that is so then Lama Tsongkhapa said, as long as this kind of vigilance has not arisen, that kind of very strong practice of vigilance, where you can even identify even before they arises, you know. Although you decide that from this point until the point there was faultless meditation without laxity and excitement, this is baseless, for even if laxity or excitement were to arise, you would not be able to ascertain them, given powerful vigilance had not arisen. And so therefore, that is where Lama Tsongkhapa was saying, you know, we need to develop that strong. And so in order to realize the laxity and excitement, you need vigilance. Not only vigilant, very strong vigilant. Very strong, powerful vigilant. And so if we have not developed that kind of strong vigilance, then, even we may meditate for long and even for years, but with a subtle laxity, as we mentioned, and excitement without sensing them as they occur, even though subtle laxities have crept in our meditations, still we are not aware is there, and thinking that we have developed a faultless meditations or concentrations. And we are unable to do that because we don't have the tools to identify that. And the tools to identify that clearly is a vigilant mind. It is like the camera, It's like the spy, the camera, And when our practice of that is very strong, of course, once you identify it, then if you have excitement, any level of excitement, whether it's gross, subtle, more subtle, there are different kind of practice you can apply and overcome them. Or if any level of laxity, whether it's gross, subtle, most different antidote, different practices you apply and you can overcome them. Once vigilant, identify it, recognize it, then you apply that. But in some cases, if your practice of mindfulness and vigilance is very strong, you don't even have to apply the antidotes. Of course, if we can identify even before they arises, it becomes more easier. But even when they're trying to, the mind is such, mind is a very interesting phenomena, and just like we human beings, if there is a camera or police watching, we'll be careful, okay? Whether we're driving or whatever we are doing. They don't have to give us ticket immediately, okay? When they are not there, then we overspeed it and then later we get ticket. But when you notice they are watching there, camera is there or there is police car there waiting, you don't do that and you don't get ticket. Same way, when our vigilant mind is watching, sometimes the delusions, they don't arise. When they know that there is a mind watching it, being aware of that. And when they know that your mind is not watching, you are not aware, then that is when they take the opportunity to arise. And whether it's the delusion, whether it's, check it out, it is interesting, just like that we do with the police or camera, the mind also play that kind of game, When one side of your mind is being aware and watchful with that kind of vigilance, such as the delusions tend to not arise easily, not arise easily and strongly. But when we are not doing that, when we are not watching our mind, when we are not watching our thoughts, then that is when they try to speed up, They try to arise quickly and very strongly. So how to generate and maintain the vigilant or introspection mind? So then that is where Lama Tsongkhapa says, how do we do that? And Lama Tsongkhapa here said the most essential cause is the method of maintaining mindfulness presented earlier. So the main essential point to generate and maintain the the vigilant or introspection mind is to practice and maintain the mindfulness, as it explained earlier, going back to the objects again and again, placing your mind or setting your mind, focusing your mind to the objects, without losing that again and again, So that is that the more you are able to keep with your mindfulness, the more you are able to keep to the object without losing the objects, the more easier it is for the introspection mind to its job, It is like, when people are following the rules, it's easy for the police to watch. When everyone is doing not following the rule, then the police get too distracted, They can't take care. They try to take care, and then there's something happening here and too mess. But when people are, the majority of them are following the rules, if there are few people who are not following the rule, it will be easier for them to kind of investigate and kind of do things, because they have more resource, more time, and similarly introspections is like the police. And when your mind is more focused, then it is more easy to do that introspection. So that is why in some of the practitioners and masters says, when it comes to really the practice itself, even though these two practices are different, introspections and mindfulness, two different states of mind, two different practice. But when we try to really practice, integrate into practice, the main is just the mindfulness. By increasing our mindfulness, it helps to develop the introspections. And that is here also what is Lama Tsongkhapa saying here. The essential cause to develop to generate and to maintain the vigilant or introspection mind is the mindfulness, strong mindfulness practice. So if we hear Lama, I said, if we can generate a continuous mindfulness in that manner, you will not be able to stop forgetting the objects. You will not forget the objects. You will not lose the objects, and your mind wander off from the objects. And therefore you will reverse the long-term insensitivity to the occurrence of laxity and excitement, and then you will be able to kind of not be under the control or under the influence of any, either it is the laxity or excitement. And also then the vigilant become more stronger. And when you have that kind of strong mindfulness and vigilant, then you can recognize the laxity and excitement very easily, quickly and easily, And this is very clear when you look it from perspective of your own experience. So here is Lama Tsongkhapa saying, even though he can explain scripturally from all the Indian master and here, but mainly then we have to understand from our own experience. And again, Lama Tsongkhapa, he's saying, with his own experience. And it is same like everything, You can learn how to drive, but really to drive, you need to really drive, You can't just learn from the books, You even know really how to drive. Of course, you can learn from the books, many things, but really to be a driver, you have to really drive it. And same thing, even though we can learn about what laxity is, what excitement is, what the mindfulness or what the vigilant mind is, and how to apply them, then all of that scripture, but really to really perfect in that kind of practice and meditation, then we really have to practice, and we have to really learn that with our experience. And so then so here Lama Tsongkhapa explained the main cause to develop vigilance is the mindfulness. And then now he's explaining how to apply or how to integrate the vigilant practice itself. And so that is where it is said, watching whether our mind is kind of scattered or not, whether our mind is wandering off or not, whether our mind is still keeping stable on the object or not, whether our mind is kind of losing the clarity or intensity or not. Doing that kind of analyze, examination, investigation time to time is the how to apply the introspections. And so that is what it is saying. So here's a so whether we are trying to meditate, the image of the Buddha, for our shamatha, whether we are trying to, or whether we are trying to meditate on the mind itself, whatever your object, whether it is an external object such as Buddha's image, or whether it's your nature of your mind itself. You try to keep your mindfulness with that, just holding or observing the object, whether it's the Buddha's image or whether it's if you are meditating on the nature of your mind itself, that while you are holding the object with the mindfulness, as focus, as mentioned earlier, and then constantly watching whether your mind is still focused on the object or not, or whether your mind is fully focused on the object or not, So that kind of, sometimes even your mind is focused. Your mind might be focused, but not fully focused. Do you get it? As we mentioned about the subtle and gross excitement, or even when it's kind of focused quite fully, but is there a danger of loosening? Is there a danger of being excited? So watching time to time, or also seeing, whether your mind, whether there's a clarity or intensity in the object or not. Even when there's clarity there, whether there is intensity or not. Even when there is intensity there, whether there's a danger of losing that intensity or not. So kind of checking that time to time is the key for this introspection. So that is why this should be understood as the essential point for maintaining the vigilance. That is how we, that is how we try to generate and maintain the vigilant mind or introspection mind in terms of practice. And again, at the very beginning, as I did mention previously, at the very beginning, we have to do that more. And as our practice gets better and better, it requires less and less. And when your practice becomes good, then you don't have to do so often. You can do, but at the very beginning, we have to do more and more, because we can lose our mind very easily to the excitement, distractions. We can, so the more you do it, the more you are able to identify quickly, and then more we can apply the antidote easily. And so at the very beginning, we try to do that introspection or vigilant, that kind of investigation more often. Then as our meditations get more stable, more better, then you do less and less. It's like watching a child, or naughty student, the teacher has to pay attention all the time, keep on checking that student, whether he's misbehaving, being naughty. And when that started to behave better, then you don't have to watch so often, Once a while you can see. And then slowly, the student doesn't behave any naughty or badly, then you don't even have to watch hardly. Or it can be not only be the students, it can be your children, When they are more naughty, more mischievous, you have to watch more. And as they mellow more, they mature more, and they don't misbehave, then you don't have to pay as much attention, as much watch. You don't have to watch all the time. And that is the same with your mind. Your meditations. And that vigilance requires less often, and that is the same thing that Shantideva said, investigate again and again the state of body and mind. In brief, it's just that alone is the definition of guarding the vigilance, So, as Shantideva explained in both of the way of life, in order to improve and in order to increase and improve our practice of more mindfulness and vigilance, in order to make it stronger, is we have to try to bring the mindfulness and vigilance in every aspect of our life. While you are eating mindfully. While you are cleaning mindfully. While you are driving mindfully. While you are drinking mindfully. While you are walking, running, hiking, exercise, whatever you do, being very mindful of what you are doing. So if we apply the mindfulness and vigilance in our every aspect of the life, then when you meditate to develop shamatha, calm abiding, it will be much more easier because we have stronger mindfulness and introspection mind. When you are not meditating, we allow our things to be totally distracted, everything. While we're eating, we are not mindful. Our mind is somewhere else, thinking something, doing something. While we're cleaning, our body is cleaning, but our mind is somewhere else. So then our mind get that kind of habit, getting distracted, get that kind of habit, not being in moment, in present. And then when you try to meditate, it will be very difficult to train your mind to be mindful in the moment, in the present. And that is why Shantideva explained, anything that we do when we are taking a shower, when we are again taking in very mindfully, anything we do throughout the day, even when we are not really on cushion meditating, if you do that, then if we practice that mindfulness, it is a meditation. You are not sitting on the cushions, but you are meditating. And you are developing shamatha because you are developing the cause for the shamatha, the tools for the shamatha, because the main tools to develop shamatha and mindfulness and introspection mind. These are the two main tools. The introspections and the mindfulness are the two main tools that we need to develop shamatha or the calm abiding. And so trying to apply that is important, you know. If we do that, then it will be easy and quick and easy to develop shamatha. We can develop shamatha quickly, easily, if we apply the mindfulness and vigilance in all the time. And also, if we apply it, definitely, you know, it will help us to not to break our vows, precepts. It will help us not to hurt and harm others or ourselves. It will help us not to be under the delusional for long times or most times, you know. So it can be very very effective, helpful in many ways. And so therefore, that is what we need to apply our everyday. And that is why, you know, the walking meditation, when Buddha said, when you walk it mindfully, you know, being very aware of each movement of your walk, you know. And so, and same with the eating, everything that we do, especially when we are trying, it is important all the time. And yeah. So it doesn't mean that we try to apply mindfulness introspections or the vigilance only when we are trying to develop shamatha and when we are cushions, you know. We will not have much success if we don't apply in everyday life. If you just try to apply that meditation only when you are on the cushions, only when you are sitting, then the chances of success will be very little. But if we are able to bring that in our everyday life, everything that we do, 24 hours, at least when we're awake, then the chances of developing shamatha easily and quickly increases. Mm-hmm. So therefore here Lama Tsongkhapa said that we need to differentiate the method for maintaining mindfulness and vigilance. And so there he said, by doing this, 5. By doing this, you therefore generate vigilance, like that kind of watching, investigating, you know, your body and mind and thoughts all the time. And when you generate that kind of vigilance, and that knows the laxity, excitement, as soon as they are about to arise, you know, not only you are able to identify and recognize immediately when it arises, but even before that, when it's about to arise, you can, as your vigilance becomes stronger, you are able to arise that. On the other hand, by the means of applying the mindfulness, the forgetfulness of your mind or the losing of your object, you know, your mind being distracted and wander off is stopped. So you observe well, so you are able to focus. You are able to focus the object well without losing it. Not only losing it, fully, your mind fully being there, not half-minded, but fully being there, you know. So therefore, you need to distinguish between, you know, how to apply mindfulness and introspections, and what are their functionings, of the vigilant mind and what is functioning of the mindfulness mind, and how to improve and increase them, And so we need to. So I think maybe today we will kind of stop here. So I guess we all have to kind of try to apply the mindfulness and vigilance as much as possible in our everyday life. Even maybe we cannot apply everything at the moment beginning. It would be nice to try to emphasize, of course, during the meditation, but also, let's say we start with one thing. We say, from tomorrow, when I'm eating, I'm going to eat it mindfully. So we just try to focus. Every time we eat, we try to eat mindfully. And with the time, then it becomes habit. Then you don't have to force it. Every time you eat, you are reminded of mindfulness and you try to be mindful. And then slowly you apply from that eating, that become natural and habit and easy. Then you bring that mindfulness. What other things? Maybe washing your dishes. While you are washing dishes, being mindful. And I think it's also good, you will break less. You can save some money. Or you will not get shouted by someone because we broke something. but because sometimes it becomes overwhelming. If we say I have to apply mindfulness on everything, it seems impossible, and we forget. But we just focus on one thing, and we make habit to do that all. And once that becomes habit over the time, you don't have to put much effort when you are doing that one, because it has familiarity, habitual, and easy. And then next one, while washing, you try to be mindful. And at the very beginning, sometimes you forget, and sometimes you remember. And when you remember, you apply. But sometimes you forget. And again, try to put more effort and remind ourselves. And then slowly, with the time, that also becomes familiarity, and every time you wash, mindfulness comes naturally, and then you apply to others while you're driving. And that is how we kind of, on practical level, that is how we can kind of start from one and increase slowly, and then apply in all the aspects of our life. Okay, so yeah, we'll do the dedications. Gewadi nyudu da lama sangye do gyone do a chi gyama leba e sa la kwe ba sho changjo sem jo renpo che ma ke pa na ke gyu che gewa nyamba me ba yang kong le kong do pe wa sho. The wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, to the incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. To Jiangxin Jianggen Jiawe, Tenzin Jiangbewe, Kunso Dobo Zi, Xiaosong Kuwe Lema Dudu, Ba Dao So Du Jie Gun Du Xiao Ten Xiao. Thank you everyone, thank you.